The Robert Greene Blueprint. Essential Lessons on Power, Mastery, and Human Nature. Introduction. You're being played, right now. In your career, your relationships, your life. Not because people are evil, but because you don't understand the invisible rules that govern human behavior. The patterns that determine who advances and who stagnates. The dynamics that separate those who build power from those who remain powerless. Robert Greene spent decades decoding these rules. He studied emperors and con artists, masters and failures, strategists and victims across centuries. His books, The 48 Laws of Power, Mastery, The Laws of Human Nature, The 33 Strategies of War, have sold millions. They're studied in boardrooms and banned in some prisons. Why? Because Greene reveals how the world actually works when you strip away comfortable illusions. But his complete works span over 2,500 pages. The wisdom is profound but scattered across centuries. This book solves that problem. Greene's most powerful lessons distilled, organized, ready to implement. The cost of ignorance. Sarah was brilliant. Stanford MBA, top firm, worked harder than anyone. 3 years in, she watched her colleague Marcus get promoted while she got passed over. Same talent, same opportunities, different outcomes. Marcus understood something Sarah didn't. Competence isn't enough. Success requires understanding the invisible dynamics Greene decoded. The patterns of power, the reality of human nature, the strategies that actually work. Sarah focused on tasks. Marcus focused on positioning. Sarah worked hard. Marcus worked strategically. Sarah was reactive. Marcus saw 3 moves ahead. After discovering Greene's work, Sarah transformed. 6 months later, her trajectory had completely changed. The difference wasn't intelligence. It was awareness of the rules. What you'll master. Part 1. Master yourself first. Self-awareness. Discovering your unique path. Cultivating strategic patience. You can't influence the world while blind to your own patterns. Part 2. Decode human nature. Reading people accurately. Building unshakable reputation. Making yourself invaluable. Understanding others is how you create leverage. Part 3. Execute with strategy. Choosing battles wisely. Transforming obstacles into fuel. Building unstoppable momentum. Knowledge without execution is entertainment. 9 chapters. 9 essential laws from Greene's work. Each grounded in history, illustrated through modern life, designed for immediate application. Why this matters now. You're competing against people who understand these patterns. Someone else is reading people accurately while you take words at face value. Someone else is building reputation strategically while you hope hard work speaks for itself. Someone else is positioning themselves as invaluable while you remain replaceable. The people who understand Greene's laws aren't smarter than you. They're just operating with better information about how reality works. The truth Greene's work is controversial because it's honest. He describes how power works without pretending the world is fair. He reveals strategies that make some people uncomfortable because they prefer you stay naive. But understanding these patterns doesn't corrupt you unless you were already corrupt. A surgeon's knowledge of how to cut doesn't make them a murderer. Your character determines how you use knowledge, not whether you possess it. You can be ethical and strategic, principled and powerful, authentic and influential. Anyone who tells you otherwise is either naive or trying to keep you weak. How to read this. Each chapter follows the same structure. Historical example, modern parallel, Greene's principle, with specific laws cited, and questions that develop your strategic thinking. This isn't passive reading. The chapters demand engagement. The questions require honest answers. If you want reassurance you're already doing everything right, look elsewhere. But if you want to understand how power and mastery actually work, if you're tired of being blindsided by dynamics you don't understand, of watching less talented people advance while you stay stuck, then keep reading. Read 1 chapter at a time. Sit with the questions. Depth beats speed. Your choice. You're standing at a fork. One path is comfortable. Keep operating the way you have been. Stay confused about why some people succeed while others struggle. The other path is clear sight. Understand the patterns, see through the performance, operate strategically instead of reactively. Sarah took the second path. Marcus was already on it. The people advancing around you are on it, whether you realize it or not. The blueprint is in your hands. What happens next depends on whether you're brave enough to see reality clearly and act on what you see. Part 1. Master yourself first. Chapter 1. Know your shadow. The historical mirror. Napoleon Bonaparte, at the pinnacle of his power, stood before a decision that would define his legacy. His advisors warned against invading Russia. The distances were impossible, the supply lines untenable, the Russian winter merciless. Caulaincourt, his trusted diplomat, pleaded with him to reconsider. But Napoleon couldn't hear them. His ego had grown too large to accommodate doubt. He saw himself as invincible, destined for greatness, immune to the forces that destroyed lesser men. Every previous victory reinforced this delusion. He'd rewritten the rules of warfare, conquered Europe, crowned himself emperor. Why would Russia be different? Of the 685,000 soldiers who marched into Russia in June 1812, fewer than 27,000 returned. The greatest military mind of his generation destroyed himself not through lack of skill, but through inability to see his own blind spots. His genius had become his prison. Contrast this with Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the Roman Empire at its zenith, yet treated himself like a specimen under examination. Each night, he wrote meditations dissecting his own failures, prejudices, and weaknesses. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly, he wrote. But then he added the critical insight. I have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own. Marcus understood what Napoleon forgot. The greatest enemy lives within. He ruled for 19 years, died respected, and left a philosophical legacy that endures 2 millennia later. Napoleon died in exile, his empire collapsed, his name synonymous with catastrophic overreach. The difference. One emperor studied himself with ruthless honesty. The other believed his own mythology. The modern echo. You see this pattern playing out in every organization, every relationship, every life that hits an invisible ceiling. Daniel was a senior product manager at a tech company, known for his sharp intellect and decisive leadership. When the VP position opened, he was the obvious choice. He didn't get it. The feedback was devastating. You have significant blind spots. You steamroll people in meetings. Your team respects your competence but doesn't trust you with their honest opinions. He was stunned. I'm direct. I push for excellence. That's leadership. No, his manager said. That's ego disguised as leadership, and you can't see the difference. Daniel's story isn't unique. It's universal. Somewhere in your life right now, you're Napoleon before Russia. You have a blind spot so large, so fundamental, that everyone around you can see it except you. And it's costing you more than you realize. The principle, you are a stranger to yourself. Here's an uncomfortable truth. You are lying to yourself right now about something important, and you don't even know what it is. That's what makes it dangerous. In the laws of human nature, law number 1, master your emotional self. Robert Greene argues that self-deception is the fundamental human condition. We walk through life constructing elaborate stories about who we are, why we do what we do, and how we're perceived by others. These stories are almost always incomplete, flattering, and strategically edited to protect our ego. We are strangers to ourselves, operating from unconscious patterns, ancient wounds, and invisible biases that shape every decision we make. And we're the last to see it. Greene identifies the core mechanisms of self-deception. We are consumed by self-absorption. Your natural state is to interpret everything through the lens of your own needs, fears, and desires. When your boss seems irritated, you assume it's about you. It's probably not. When your partner is distant, you create a story about what you did wrong. They're likely dealing with their own internal world. But you can't see past your own reflection. We rationalize relentlessly. You make decisions based on emotion, fear, desire, ego, insecurity, and then construct logical explanations afterward. You didn't leave that job because you were scared of the challenge. You left because the culture wasn't right. You didn't avoid that difficult conversation because of cowardice. You were choosing your battles wisely. The lies you tell yourself are the most convincing because you need them to be true. We disown our shadow. The parts of yourself you find unacceptable, your jealousy, pettiness, need for validation, hunger for power, don't disappear when you deny them. This is the core of the laws of human nature, law number 9, confront your dark side. They leak out sideways. The anger you won't acknowledge becomes passive aggression. The ambition you pretend not to have becomes resentment toward those who succeed. The neediness you hide becomes manipulation disguised as generosity. We project our disowned qualities onto others. That colleague you think is arrogant? Look closer. They might be reflecting your own unacknowledged superiority complex. The friend you find exhaustingly needy? Perhaps they're showing you the dependency you refuse to admit. The person you judge as manipulative? Consider what games you might be playing that you've dressed up as authenticity. This isn't abstract psychology. This is the mechanism by which careers are destroyed, relationships collapse, and potential is squandered. Every terrible decision you've made traces back to a moment when you couldn't see yourself clearly, when you were operating on autopilot, driven by unconscious patterns you'd never examined, when your ego was in the driver's seat and you thought it was wisdom. The person who develops self-awareness, genuine, unflinching self-awareness, has an almost unfair advantage. While everyone else is sleepwalking through their patterns, you're awake. While they're reacting from ancient wounds, you're responding from conscious choice. While they're defending their self-image, you're focused on reality. This is what Greene means by achieving a higher perspective on yourself. It's not becoming perfect. It's developing the capacity to observe yourself the way you'd observe a stranger. With curiosity instead of defensiveness. With clarity instead of justification. Consider how easily you spot other people's patterns. As Greene discusses in The Laws of Human Nature, Law 3, see through people's masks. You see your friend repeatedly dating emotionally unavailable partners. You recognize your colleague's habit of overpromising and under-delivering. You notice your sibling's tendency to create drama when life gets stable. But your own patterns? Invisible. You're looking through them, not at them. The work of self-awareness is learning to turn that observational capacity inward. To study yourself with the same objectivity you'd study anyone else. What patterns would become obvious if you weren't invested in maintaining a particular self-image? What would be clear to someone who didn't need you to be smart, or good, or strong, or right? Greene studied hundreds of historical figures who achieved extraordinary success. Nearly all shared this quality: brutal honesty about themselves. They didn't indulge comfortable self-deception. They looked at their weaknesses squarely and either worked to improve them or found strategic ways to work around them. They understood that denial requires enormous energy that could be redirected toward actual growth. Benjamin Franklin kept a detailed chart of his character flaws and tracked his progress daily. Leonardo da Vinci filled notebooks with harsh self-assessments of his procrastination and scattered focus. Eleanor Roosevelt wrote extensively about her insecurities and how they shaped her behavior. These weren't exercises in self-flagellation. They were strategic self-knowledge. Think about what this means practically. The executive who knows they become defensive when challenged can prepare for that reaction and choose curiosity instead. The leader who recognizes their need to be liked, sometimes prevents necessary difficult conversations, can develop systems to have them anyway. The entrepreneur who understands their tendency toward optimism bias can build in skeptical advisors and realistic projections. In relationships, understanding your patterns. Do you pursue or withdraw under stress? Do you need reassurance or space? What childhood wounds are you unconsciously trying to heal through your partner? Allows you to communicate needs clearly instead of acting them out and resenting others for not reading your mind. In decision-making, recognizing your biases, confirmation bias, sunk cost fallacy, the tendency to see what you want to see, helps you build systems that counterbalance your natural tendencies. The shadow work Greene advocates is deeply uncomfortable. You'll discover you've been selfish in ways you'd condemned in others. You'll see how you've manipulated while claiming authenticity. You'll recognize how you've blamed circumstance for outcomes you created. You'll find the gap between who you think you are and who you actually are is wider than you imagined. But here's the paradox. The more honest you are about your flaws, the less power they have over you. Denial is exhausting. It requires constant management of your self-image, endless defense against threats to your ego, avoidance of situations that might expose your weaknesses. Self-awareness frees that energy for actually growing and achieving your goals. Moreover, authentic self-awareness makes you exponentially more effective with others. When you're not defending your ego, you can listen. When you're not projecting your issues, you can see people clearly. When you understand your triggers, you stop reacting in ways that undermine your interests. This is why Greene insists that mastery of self must precede mastery of craft or social dynamics. Without it, you're building on sand. Your unconscious patterns will sabotage you at every turn, and you won't even see it happening. Daniel eventually got his promotion, but only after 6 months of the most uncomfortable self-examination of his life. His confidence had been masking deep insecurity about being wrong. His decisiveness was a defense against the vulnerability of not knowing. His high standards were a way to control situations where he felt threatened. The moment he could see these patterns, everything shifted. Not because he became perfect, but because he became aware. And awareness is where all real power begins. What Greene calls in The 48 Laws of Power, Law number 25, recreate yourself, the foundation of genuine transformation, the invitation to see. So how do you see what you cannot see? There's no comfortable path to this knowledge, but there are questions that cut through self-deception if you have the courage to answer them honestly. What do you criticize most harshly in others? Write down 3 traits or behaviors that trigger immediate judgment in you. Now consider. These are almost always your own disowned qualities. The things you condemn most loudly in others are the things you're most afraid exist within yourself. Your harshest judgments are mirrors. What feedback have multiple people given you that you've dismissed? If 3 different people in 3 different contexts have told you the same thing about yourself, and you've defended against it each time, that's your blind spot speaking. The pattern you most resist seeing is usually the one destroying you most effectively. What are you most proud of about yourself? Your strengths, your values, the traits you consider core to your identity. Now ask the harder question. What's the shadow side of each? Independence becomes inability to trust or ask for help. Confidence becomes arrogance that won't admit mistakes. High standards become impossible perfectionism that paralyzes action. Every strength pushed too far becomes a weakness. When do you feel most defensive? Notice the situations that trigger immediate justification, explanation, or counterattack. That's your ego protecting a wound. The defensiveness marks the territory you most need to examine. Find 3 people who will tell you the truth. Not people who like you unconditionally or need something from you. People who've seen you at your worst and care enough to be honest. Ask them, when have you seen me make things harder for myself than necessary? Then, this is the crucial part. Be silent. Don't defend, explain, or rationalize. Just receive the information. The urge to speak will be overwhelming. Resist it. Listen. Write down what they tell you word for word. Later, alone, read it back and look for patterns. The truth about yourself arrives in repetitions and echoes, not in single observations. Observe yourself as if you were a stranger. For 1 week, imagine a documentary filmmaker is following you, capturing every interaction, decision, and reaction. Each evening, write a paragraph about yourself in 3rd person. This person tends to focus specifically on how do they behave under pressure? How do they respond to criticism? How do they treat people with less power? What do they avoid? The patterns will emerge, they always do. Trace each pattern to its origin. When did this behavior begin? What was it protecting you from? What did it help you achieve? Most of your current patterns were brilliant survival strategies at some point in your past. The problem is that survival strategies rarely become thriving strategies. What worked when you were powerless might be sabotaging you now that you're not. Daniel's pattern of steamrolling others in meetings began when he was a junior employee whose ideas were constantly dismissed. Being forceful became his survival mechanism. It worked then. It destroyed trust later. Understanding this origin didn't excuse the behavior, but it allowed him to see it clearly and choose differently. This is not about becoming perfect. Marcus Aurelius was still flawed, still made mistakes, still struggled with his nature. But he saw himself clearly, and that clarity gave him choices that self-deception never allows. Napoleon died believing he'd been betrayed by circumstance, by lesser men, by cruel fate. He never saw that he'd betrayed himself. You have the same choice they did. You can study yourself honestly, see your patterns clearly, and become conscious of the forces that drive you. Or you can remain a stranger to yourself, wondering why the same problems keep appearing in different forms, why success feels just out of reach, why people respond to you in ways you don't understand. Self-awareness doesn't guarantee success, but self-deception guarantees eventual failure. The mirror is there. The question is whether you're brave enough to look. Chapter 2. Discover your unique path. The historical mirror. Leonardo da Vinci was born illegitimate in 1452, a status that barred him from university and the prestigious professions. He couldn't become a doctor, lawyer, or scholar. Society had decided his ceiling before he could walk. But Leonardo had noticed something about himself from childhood. He was obsessed with how things worked. He would spend hours watching water flow, studying the flight patterns of birds, dissecting the mechanics of human movement. While other children played, he drew. While others accepted explanations, he questioned. His mind didn't work like other people's minds, and rather than fight this difference, He leaned into it. At 14, he apprenticed with Andrea del Verrocchio in Florence. While other apprentices dutifully copied their master's techniques, Leonardo pushed beyond. He studied anatomy by dissecting corpses, illegal and blasphemous at the time. He filled thousands of pages with observations about light, shadow, proportion, engineering, geology, botany. He wasn't just learning to paint, he was learning to see. The result? He became perhaps the most accomplished human being who ever lived. Painter, sculptor, architect, engineer, scientist, anatomist, inventor. The Mona Lisa and the Last Supper. Designs for helicopters, tanks, and parachutes, centuries before they could be built. Discoveries about human anatomy that wouldn't be rediscovered for 300 years. Leonardo's genius wasn't that he was born with superhuman abilities. His genius was that he identified what made him uniquely himself, this peculiar combination of artistic vision and scientific curiosity, and spent his entire life developing it with obsessive focus. Compare this to countless talented people throughout history who ignored their natural inclinations because they didn't fit conventional paths. The brilliant mathematician who became a miserable lawyer because it paid better. The natural teacher who spent decades in corporate jobs they hated. The artist who never picked up a brush because art isn't practical. These people weren't lazy or unskilled. They simply never discovered or refused to honor their life's task, and they spent their lives wondering why success felt so hard, why fulfillment remained elusive, why they could never quite reach their potential. The path was there all along, they just weren't looking for it. The modern echo. Jessica was a successful management consultant at a top firm. By every external measure, she'd made it. Prestigious company, impressive salary, clear advancement path. Her parents were proud. Her peers were envious. She was also miserable. The work that energized her colleagues, optimizing processes, building financial models, presenting to executives, left her empty. She was competent at it, even good at it. But competence isn't the same as calling. She could do the work. She just couldn't make herself care about it. What she did care about, what she thought about constantly, was design. How spaces made people feel. Why certain environments sparked creativity, while others crushed it. She'd redesign restaurants in her head while waiting for food. She'd sketch office layouts during boring meetings. She consumed architecture books the way her colleagues consumed business cases. But she dismissed this interest as a hobby, not a career. Architecture required years of additional schooling. She'd be starting over. What about her salary, her trajectory? What would people think? So she stayed in consulting for 3 more years, growing more numb and resentful each quarter. Then her firm assigned her to a project redesigning a hospital system. For the first time, her design obsession and her professional work intersected. She spent nights researching healthcare design principles. She fought for spatial changes her colleagues thought irrelevant. She poured everything into it. The client loved it. More importantly, Jessica felt alive for the first time in years. That project became her bridge. She transitioned into design consulting, then took a significant pay cut to work at an architecture firm. 5 years later, she'd become one of the most sought-after healthcare facility designers in her region. I wasted years being pretty good at something I didn't care about, she told me. I could have spent that time becoming extraordinary at something I loved. The signs were always there. I just wasn't brave enough to follow them. The principle. Your life's task is already inside you. In Mastery. Chapter 1. Discover your calling, the life's task. Robert Greene argues that every person has what he calls a life's task, a unique combination of natural inclinations, fascinations, and abilities that, when developed with intensity over years, leads to mastery and fulfillment. This isn't mystical. It's practical. You already have clues about what your life's task might be. They appear in what captivated you as a child before the world told you what you should want. Children are brutally honest about their interests. They pursue fascination without concern for practicality or status. What did you do for hours without being told? What questions obsessed you? Those early inclinations often point toward your deepest aptitudes, before they were covered over by expectations and fear. What you're naturally curious about, even when there's no practical reason to be. You don't need discipline to learn about this. You seek information about it voluntarily. You lose track of time when engaged with it. Other people think you're weird for caring so much about something so specific. That's the signal. What makes you feel envious when you see others doing it well? Not casual jealousy, but the specific envy that makes you think, that should be me. I could do that. I want to be doing that. Envy is information. It tells you what you value and where your ambitions actually lie, as opposed to where you think they should lie, where your natural strengths and deep interests intersect. You might be good at many things, but there's usually one area where talent meets genuine fascination, where you're not just capable but endlessly interested. That intersection is fertile ground. Most people never discover their life's task, or they discover it but refuse to pursue it. Why? They confuse it with a job title. Your life's task isn't be a doctor or be an entrepreneur. It's deeper than that. It's a particular way of seeing and engaging with the world. Leonardo's life's task wasn't be a painter. It was understand and express the underlying patterns of nature. That manifested through painting, but also through engineering, anatomy, and science. They dismiss it as impractical. You live in a world obsessed with safe conventional paths, the credential-heavy professions, the corporate ladder, the startup that might get acquired. These paths aren't wrong, but they're not your life's task unless they genuinely align with your deepest inclinations. Most people choose practicality over calling, then spend decades rationalizing why they're unfulfilled. They're afraid of starting over or starting late. You've already invested years in your current path. Changing course feels like admitting failure. But here's the truth. Every day you spend on the wrong path is another day not spent on the right one. Leonardo didn't waste time wondering if 14 was too late to start. He started. The time will pass regardless. The only question is whether you'll spend it becoming who you actually are, or pretending to be someone you're not. They need certainty before they commit. You want to know it will work out before you begin. But certainty doesn't come before commitment. It emerges through the process of commitment. You discover whether this is truly your path by walking it, not by analyzing it from a distance. Greene studied dozens of masters across fields: Einstein, Mozart, Benjamin Franklin, Martha Graham, Freddie Roach. None of them had perfect clarity about their path from the beginning, but they all had something in common. They noticed what pulled them, and they followed that pull with increasing focus and intensity over years. The journey looks like this, drawn from Greene's framework in Mastery. Discovery phase. You identify your inclinations and interests, even if they seem scattered or impractical. You experiment, explore, and pay attention to what energizes versus drains you. Apprenticeship phase. You put yourself in environments where you can learn from people who've achieved mastery. As Greene extensively details in Mastery, Chapter 2. Submit to reality, the ideal apprenticeship. You absorb everything, endure tedium, accept that you'll be incompetent at first. This phase is humbling and essential. Most people quit here because their ego can't handle being a beginner. Creative active phase. After years of learning, you begin to see what others don't. You develop your own voice, your own approach. You stop imitating and start innovating. You combine your unique background and perspective with your hard-won skills. Mastery. You've internalized knowledge so deeply that action becomes intuitive. You operate at a level others find almost magical. But it's not magic. It's 10,000 plus hours of focused development in alignment with who you actually are. Most people never reach mastery because they never commit to the journey. They dabble. They switch paths whenever resistance appears. They optimize for comfort instead of growth. Here's what you need to understand. Your life's task doesn't guarantee ease. Leonardo faced enormous obstacles: lack of formal education, illegitimate birth, patrons who demanded commercial work when he wanted to experiment. But obstacles along your true path feel different than obstacles on the wrong path. One creates meaningful struggle that develops you. The other creates meaningless suffering that depletes you. The person following their life's task works incredibly hard, often harder than people on conventional paths. But the work is energizing rather than draining because it's aligned with their nature. They're not fighting themselves while fighting the world. They're unified in purpose. This is why Greene insists that discovering your life's task is the foundation of mastery. You can't sustain the years of intense focus required for excellence if you're pursuing something you don't genuinely care about. You'll burn out, plateau, or quit. But when you're developing capacities that reflect your deepest nature, the work itself becomes the reward. Jessica didn't become a designer because it was easy. She became one because not being a designer was slowly killing something essential in her. The question isn't whether following your life's task is hard. The question is whether not following it is harder. The invitation to discover. So how do you identify what you're actually meant to develop? The clues are already there, but they require honest observation. What did you love before the world told you what to love? Go back to childhood before you learned to perform for adults' approval. What activity made you lose track of time? What were you endlessly curious about? Write down everything you remember, even if it seems irrelevant now. Patterns will emerge. What do you think about voluntarily? When your mind wanders during mundane tasks, where does it go? What do you research without being assigned to? What problems do you try to solve even when no one's paying you? Your attention goes where your true interests lie. Who do you envy and why specifically? Not general jealousy about wealth or status. Specific envy about the work someone does, the life they lead, the problems they solve. Write down 5 people whose work makes you think, I wish I were doing that. Then ask, what exactly about their work or life appeals to you? That specificity reveals your true values. Where do competence and fascination intersect? You might be competent at many things, but there's usually one area where you're both capable and endlessly interested. That intersection is your signal. If you're good at it but don't care about it, that's a skill, not a calling. If you care about it but have no aptitude, you'll face unnecessary struggle. The sweet spot is where both exist. What would you do if practical concerns disappeared? If money weren't an issue? If status didn't matter? If you didn't have to explain yourself to anyone? What would you spend your time developing? The answer might not be your life's task exactly, but it points in the right direction. What feels like play to you but looks like work to others? The activities that others find tedious but you find absorbing, that's your clue. You're wired differently in that domain, which means you can go deeper and sustain effort longer than others. Once you have clues, the question becomes, how do you move toward this even if you can't immediately abandon everything else? Create bridges, not leaps. Jessica didn't quit consulting the day she realized she loved design. She took a project that combined both. She built credibility. She networked with designers. She saved money. Then she made the transition from a position of some strength rather than desperation. Smart strategy, not reckless passion. Commit to apprenticeship. Once you know the direction, find the best people in that field and learn from them. Subordinate your ego. Accept that you'll be incompetent at first. Absorb everything. This phase might take years, but it's essential. Most people skip it and wonder why they plateau early. Follow what energizes you, not what impresses others. Your life's task might not be prestigious. It might not make immediate money. Other people might not understand it. Follow it anyway. The people who achieve mastery and fulfillment are the ones who ignored conventional approval in favor of deep alignment. Accept that clarity comes through action, not analysis. You won't have perfect certainty before you start. You'll have hints, inclinations, curiosities. Follow them. The path becomes visible as you walk it. Waiting for clarity before moving guarantees you'll wait forever. Leonardo died at 67, still sketching and observing until his final days. He never stopped exploring, never stopped developing his capacities. He didn't achieve mastery and then coast. He achieved mastery because he never stopped. Your life's task isn't a destination you reach and then relax. It's a direction you commit to for the long haul. The question isn't whether you'll encounter obstacles or doubt. The question is whether you'll face those challenges while becoming who you actually are, or while pretending to be someone you're not. The path is already inside you. The only question is whether you're brave enough to follow it. Chapter 3. Cultivate Strategic Patience. The Historical Mirror. In 1862, Ulysses S. Grant was considered a failure by almost everyone who knew him. He'd been forced to resign from the army years earlier due to drinking problems. He'd failed at farming, failed at business, and was working in his father's leather shop at age 38, a broken man selling hides. When the Civil War began, he managed to secure a colonelcy through political connections. Few expected much from him. He was older, damaged, unremarkable. The glittering generals got the attention. McClellan with his grand strategies and perfect uniforms. The West Point elite who spoke eloquently about military theory. But Grant understood something they didn't. Wars aren't won by brilliant single strokes or theatrical gestures. They're won through relentless, patient pressure applied consistently over time. While McClellan planned the perfect attack and hesitated, Grant moved. While others worried about their reputations, Grant focused on objectives. He lost battles but won campaigns. He made mistakes but learned from them and kept pushing forward. His approach seemed crude to the sophisticates. No grand maneuvers, no elegant solutions. just constant methodical pressure. He understood that the North's advantage was resources and population, advantages that only mattered if you were willing to sustain a long campaign. Quick, decisive victories would be ideal, but they weren't necessary. Slow, grinding progress was enough if you had the patience to see it through. By 1865, Grant had become General of the Army. By 1869, President of the United States. The drunk failure who'd sold leather at 38 had outpaced every more talented, better-educated rival through one quality: strategic patience. Compare this to George McClellan, Grant's opposite in almost every way. Brilliant, educated, impressive in appearance and speech. He could plan magnificent campaigns and inspire troops with rhetoric. But he couldn't execute. He waited for perfect conditions that never came. He overestimated enemy strength and underestimated opportunities. He wanted the decisive, glorious victory that would prove his genius. He never got it. Lincoln eventually removed him from command. McClellan spent the rest of his life bitter, convinced he'd been betrayed by lesser men, never understanding that his impatience for glory had made actual achievement impossible. Grant wrote in his memoirs, "I have never advocated war except as a means of peace." He understood that patience isn't passive waiting. It's active, strategic persistence toward a clear objective, regardless of how long it takes. One general wanted to win quickly and impressively. The other was willing to win slowly and unglamorously. Only one actually won. The modern echo. Kevin and Rachel both joined their company's leadership development program in the same year. Both were talented, ambitious, and hungry for advancement. Their paths diverged entirely based on how they approached time. Kevin wanted results immediately. He volunteered for high-visibility projects, positioned himself aggressively in meetings, and made sure executives knew his name. When he didn't get promoted after 18 months, he grew resentful. He complained about being overlooked. He started interviewing elsewhere. He job-hopped 3 times in 5 years, each time chasing a slightly better title or salary, each time leaving before he'd really mastered the role. By year 7, Kevin was a director at his 4th company. Decent salary, respectable title. But he'd developed a reputation as someone who chased promotions rather than building capabilities. His network was shallow because he never stayed anywhere long enough to build deep relationships. His expertise was broad, but thin. He knew a little about many things, but hadn't gone deep enough anywhere to become truly valuable. Rachel took a different approach. She picked one domain, operations excellence, and committed to becoming genuinely expert in it. She took on projects others found tedious. She stayed in roles long enough to see the consequences of her decisions, learning what actually worked versus what looked good in presentations. She built relationships slowly, proving herself reliable over years rather than impressive in moments. She didn't get promoted faster than Kevin initially. In fact, she watched him leap ahead while she ground through the unglamorous work of real mastery. But by year 7, she'd become the company's foremost expert in operational transformation. Executives sought her counsel. Other companies tried to recruit her. When a VP position opened, she was the only serious candidate. Kevin had optimized for the appearance of progress. Rachel had optimized for actual capability. In the short term, Kevin's approach looked smarter. In the long term, it wasn't even close. "People think patience means waiting," Rachel told me. "It doesn't. It means working towards something that takes time, without being distracted by faster but ultimately less valuable options." The principle, mastery and power both require time. Robert Greene's work across multiple books returns obsessively to one theme. Anything worth achieving takes longer than you think, and impatience destroys more potential than almost any other quality. In Mastery, the 10,000-hour rule, he argues that true expertise in any domain requires approximately 10,000 hours of focused practice, roughly 7 to 10 years of dedicated effort. This isn't arbitrary. It's the time required for your brain to form the complex neural connections that allow intuitive, expert-level performance. You cannot speed-run mastery. The hours must be accumulated. In the 48 Laws of Power, Law 35, Master the Art of Timing, and the 33 Strategies of War, Strategy number 2, Do not fight the last war. He demonstrates repeatedly that sustainable power comes from patient, strategic positioning over time, not from dramatic gestures or quick victories. The people who achieve lasting influence understand that every move is part of a longer campaign. Yet we live in a culture that celebrates speed, fast success, rapid growth, quick wins, overnight sensations. This creates a fundamental mismatch between what the culture rewards rhetorically and what actually works practically. The impatient person makes predictable mistakes. They optimize for appearance over reality. They want the title, the credential, the visible marker of success more than they want the actual capability. So they chase promotions before they've mastered their current level. They collect degrees without developing genuine expertise. They build impressive resumes while remaining fundamentally shallow. They quit when progress isn't immediately visible. Mastery develops non-linearly. You work hard for months with seemingly little progress, then suddenly everything clicks and you leap forward. The impatient person quits during the plateau, right before the breakthrough. They mistake slow visible progress for no progress. They mistake activity for achievement. They're always busy, always in motion, switching between projects and opportunities. But motion without direction is just noise. The patient strategist does less, but accomplishes more because each action builds on previous actions toward a clear objective. They're easily distracted by others' apparent success. Someone else gets promoted, launches a successful company, achieves visible recognition. The impatient person panics, "I'm falling behind," and abandons their current path to chase what looks like a shortcut. They don't see the years of invisible work that preceded that person's visible success. They play for short-term gains that undermine long-term position. They'll damage relationships for immediate advantage. They'll cut corners that create future problems. They'll take the quick money over the strategic opportunity. Each decision makes sense in isolation but collectively destroys their foundation. The patient strategist operates differently. They think in campaigns, not battles. Every action is evaluated based on whether it moves them toward their long-term objective, not whether it creates immediate gratification. They'll accept short-term losses if it strengthens their long-term position. They understand that power accumulates through consistency, not through lucky strikes. They focus on building genuine capability. While others collect credentials and chase titles, they develop real skills that make them valuable. This takes longer initially, but creates compounding advantages over time. The person with actual expertise becomes increasingly irreplaceable. The person with just credentials becomes increasingly replaceable. They use time as a strategic weapon. They know that most people are impatient, which creates opportunities. When others panic and make rash decisions, the patient strategist stays calm and capitalizes. When others quit during plateaus, the patient strategist persists and gains ground. Time itself becomes an advantage if you can endure it while others can't. They understand that timing matters as much as action. Power isn't just about making the right move, it's about making it at the right moment. The patient person waits for conditions to align. They prepare extensively so that when the opportunity appears, they're ready to execute decisively. Impatient people force opportunities prematurely and waste them. They build deep relationships over time. Trust and influence aren't created through networking events and LinkedIn connections. They're built through years of reliability, through being present during difficulties, through consistent demonstration of character. The patient person invests in relationships long before they need them. This doesn't mean passive waiting. Grant wasn't passive. He was relentlessly active. But his activity was strategic, cumulative, aimed at objectives that would take time to achieve. He didn't confuse patience with inaction. Strategic patience means working intensely toward long-term goals while resisting distraction, staying committed during the invisible middle period when progress isn't obvious, building capabilities that compound over years, positioning yourself to capitalize on opportunities when they emerge, accepting that meaningful achievement simply takes time. Greene studied masters across centuries and found this pattern repeatedly. The people who achieved lasting success were willing to endure years of apprenticeship, years of unglamorous work, years of being underestimated while they developed their capabilities. The people who flamed out wanted the results without the timeline. Mozart spent years in obscurity before his genius was recognized. Benjamin Franklin apprenticed as a printer for years before becoming a statesman. Martha Graham didn't create her revolutionary dance company until her 30s, after years of training. None of them were overnight successes. They were all patient strategists who understood that excellence requires time. The modern world makes this harder. You see someone's success on social media and don't see the decade of work that preceded it. You hear about startups that suddenly succeed and don't hear about the founder's previous failed ventures. You watch someone get promoted and don't see the years of relationship building and skill development that made it inevitable. This creates the illusion that success should come quickly, and when it doesn't, you must be doing something wrong. You're not. You're just experiencing what everyone experiences. The long middle period where you're good but not yet great, competent but not yet masterful, on the path but not yet at the destination. The question is whether you'll keep walking. The invitation to think long. Are you optimizing for the next year or the next decade? Most people don't consciously choose short-term thinking. They just never ask the question. They react to immediate pressures without considering longer trajectories. Where will your current path lead in 10 years if you stay committed? Not where you hope it might lead if everything goes perfectly. Where will it actually realistically lead if you keep developing your capabilities at a steady pace? Write this down specifically. Now ask, is that destination worth the journey? If not, strategic patience on the wrong path is just wasted time. What are you optimizing for? Credentials or capabilities? Look at how you spend your development time. Are you collecting impressive-sounding certifications and titles, or building genuine expertise that makes you irreplaceable? One impresses quickly but ages poorly. The other develops slowly but compounds indefinitely. When have you quit too early, and what did it cost you? Think about skills you started developing but abandoned, roles you left before really mastering them, relationships you didn't invest in sufficiently. What would be different if you'd stayed? Sometimes quitting is correct, but often you quit right before the breakthrough because you couldn't tolerate the plateau. What long-term investment are you avoiding because the payoff isn't immediate? Learning a difficult skill, building a deep expertise, developing a meaningful relationship, writing a book. The things worth doing usually require years of effort before they yield results. What are you not starting because you can't see the immediate return? Who has what you want, and how long did it actually take them? Find someone whose career or capabilities you admire. Research their actual path. You'll almost always find it took longer than you assumed, involved more setbacks than you knew, required more patience than you expected. This isn't discouraging. It's realistic calibration. Where are you being impatient? And what's it costing you? Are you job hopping before you've built real capabilities? Chasing promotions you're not ready for? Abandoning projects when they get difficult? Each act of impatience feels like progress, but often undermines your foundation. Build a 10-year vision. Not a fantasy about where you'll be, but a realistic development plan. What capabilities will you build? What relationships will you deepen? What body of work will you create? Map the path assuming it will take the full decade. Then commit to the first year of that decade. Not trying to accomplish the whole vision, just faithfully executing the first stage, while everyone around you is chasing quicker wins. Strategic patience isn't glamorous. You won't get celebrated for it in year 1 or 2. People will question why you're not moving faster, taking shortcuts, optimizing for visibility. Let them question, because in year 7, 8, 9, you'll be where Rachel ended up, genuinely capable, deeply networked, irreplaceable, while the Kevins of the world are still chasing their next lateral move, still building their career on sand, still wondering why success keeps slipping away. Grant didn't become a general through brilliance or connections. He became one through being willing to do unglamorous work consistently over years while others looked for shortcuts. The path to mastery is long. That's not a bug, it's a feature. The length is what makes it valuable. If it were quick, everyone would do it. The question isn't whether you have time. You're going to spend the next 10 years somewhere, doing something. The question is whether you'll spend them becoming genuinely excellent at something that matters, or just maintaining the appearance of progress while remaining fundamentally the same. Time will pass. What you build during that time is your choice. Part 2. Decode Human Nature. Chapter 4. Read What's Unspoken. The Historical Mirror. In 1945, Franklin Delano Roosevelt arrived at Yalta to negotiate the post-war world with Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin. He was dying, gaunt, exhausted, with only weeks to live. But he believed he could read Stalin, could forge a personal connection that would secure lasting peace. Roosevelt focused on Stalin's words. Stalin spoke of cooperation, of respecting sovereignty, of building a peaceful future. Roosevelt wanted to believe him. He needed to believe him. The alternative was too grim. So he interpreted Stalin's assurances at face value, dismissed Churchill's warnings as paranoid, and left Yalta confident he'd secured Soviet cooperation. Churchill, meanwhile, watched what Stalin did, not what he said. He observed Stalin's patterns. How he'd annexed the Baltic states while promising independence. How he'd eliminated dissent while claiming democracy. How every agreement was violated the moment it served his interests. Churchill read the subtext. Stalin's words were performance, his actions were truth. Within months of Roosevelt's death, Stalin had broken every Yalta agreement. Eastern Europe fell behind the Iron Curtain. The Cold War began. Roosevelt's trust in words over behavior had helped deliver half of Europe to Soviet control. Contrast this with Otto von Bismarck, the master strategist who unified Germany in the 1860s and 1870s. Bismarck operated in a world of constant diplomatic deception. Everyone lied. Everyone maneuvered. Everyone presented noble motives while pursuing raw self-interest. Bismarck's genius was that he never listened to what people said. He watched what they did when they thought no one was looking. He studied their alliances, their resource movements, their subtle shifts in position. He understood that people reveal their true intentions through their actions, particularly the small actions they don't think matter. When Napoleon III of France spoke of wanting peace, Bismarck watched French military buildups and knew war was coming. When Austria claimed friendship, Bismarck observed their diplomatic overtures to France and knew betrayal was imminent. He was never surprised because he never confused performance with reality. Bismarck spent decades outmaneuvering more powerful opponents because he understood something fundamental. People rarely say what they actually mean. They say what serves their immediate interests, what protects their ego, what makes them look good. The truth lives in behavior, not words. One leader listened to assurances and lost half a continent. The other watched actions and built an empire. The difference was knowing where truth actually resides. The modern echo. Maria sat across from the CEO, listening to his pitch about joining his startup as COO. Everything he said was perfect. He valued collaboration, wanted a true partner, believed in work-life balance, championed transparency. Her instincts screamed warning, but she couldn't articulate why. The words were right. The vision was compelling. The opportunity was significant. Then she noticed something small. When she asked about the previous COO, the CEO's body language shifted. He became slightly more rigid, his smile tighter. He said the departure was mutual and amicable, but his tone carried an edge. When she pressed gently for specifics, he changed the subject smoothly. Later, Maria did something most candidates don't. She tracked down the previous COO and 2 other executives who'd left. The story they told was nothing like the CEO's words. He micromanaged obsessively. He promised autonomy, but made every decision himself. He spoke of partnership, but undermined anyone who disagreed. The collaborative culture was pure performance. Maria declined the offer. 6 months later, the new COO had quit, and the company was imploding. People told me I was overthinking it, Maria said. All the explicit signals said yes. But the tiny inconsistencies, the things he didn't say, the moments of discomfort, the pattern of departures, those told the real story. I learned to trust what people do, especially the small things they think don't matter, over what they say. Compare this to Tom, who joined a different startup around the same time. The founder spoke beautifully about equity, about building wealth together, about being in it for the long haul. Tom was so captivated by the vision that he didn't notice the founder was vague about details, defensive when asked about vesting schedules, and had a history of diluting early employees. Tom joined. Worked brutal hours for 2 years. When the company got acquired, his equity was worth a fraction of what he'd been led to expect. The founder had structured everything to benefit himself while maintaining plausible deniability. I was so focused on what he said that I didn't pay attention to what he did, Tom reflected. The red flags were everywhere, in how he treated junior employees, in the small promises he didn't keep, in how he responded when challenged. I just didn't want to see them. The principle: truth lives in behavior, not words. In the laws of human nature, law number 3, see through people's masks, and law number 4, determine the strength of people's character. Robert Greene argues that one of the most critical skills you can develop is the ability to read people accurately, not through what they say, but through what they actually do, particularly when they think no one's paying attention. This isn't cynicism, it's realism. Most people aren't consciously lying. They're just profoundly disconnected from their own motivations and patterns. They genuinely believe the stories they tell about themselves. But those stories are usually elaborate rationalizations constructed to protect their ego and self-image. The person who says they value honesty, but gossips constantly. The leader who preaches empowerment, but micromanages everything. The partner who claims to want commitment, but consistently chooses unavailable people. The friend who speaks of loyalty, but disappears when you need them. These aren't hypocrites necessarily. They're humans operating from unconscious patterns they don't see. The words reflect who they want to be. The behavior reveals who they actually are. Greene identifies the core principles of accurate reading. People are driven by emotions disguised as reasons. Every decision is made emotionally. Fear, desire, ego, insecurity, need for validation, and then rationalized with logic afterward. Listen to someone's reasoning, and you'll hear the story they tell themselves. Watch their behavior, and you'll see what's actually driving them. When someone explains why they're leaving a job, starting a company, ending a relationship, the explicit reasons are usually half-truths at best. They're not lying. They just don't understand their own motivations. The real reasons are visible in patterns. What they've done before, what they do when stressed, where their attention actually goes. Words are performance. Behavior is truth. People curate their words carefully, a concept Greene explores in the 48 Laws of Power. Law 38. Think as you like, but behave like others. They present an idealized version of themselves, rational, principled, in control. But behavior, especially habitual behavior, reveals the operating system beneath the presentation. Watch what people do when they think it doesn't matter. How they treat service workers. How they respond to minor inconveniences. How they handle small commitments. These reveal character more accurately than grand gestures or stated values. Small inconsistencies signal larger patterns. When someone's words and actions don't align, even slightly, pay attention. The CEO who preaches transparency but is evasive on specifics. The partner who claims they're fine, but their tone says otherwise. These small mismatches are your signal to dig deeper. Most people dismiss these inconsistencies or rationalize them away. They want to believe the performance. But the inconsistencies are where truth leaks through. The person who can notice and interpret these signals has an enormous advantage. People reveal themselves under pressure. Anyone can maintain their mask during easy times. But stress, threat, or temptation reveals who people actually are. How do they behave when they're losing? When they're criticized? When no one's watching? When taking the ethical path costs them something? Greene studied countless leaders and masters who succeeded partly through their ability to read people accurately. They didn't take words at face value. They watched patterns of behavior over time. They noted small tells and inconsistencies. They understood that everyone is performing a version of themselves, and truth lives beneath the performance. Core needs drive behavior more than conscious intentions. Everyone has deep emotional needs for validation, security, power, connection, significance. These needs drive behavior in ways that override stated values. As Greene explores deeply in the laws of human nature, Law number 4, determine the strength of people's character. The person who needs validation will compromise their principles for approval. The person driven by insecurity will sabotage others to feel safe. The person hungry for power will betray trust when it serves their position. You can't hear these needs in what people say. You see them in patterns of behavior. The colleague who constantly name drops is revealing their need for status. The partner who picks fights right when things get close is revealing their fear of intimacy. The leader who can't delegate is revealing their need for control. Understanding these underlying needs, in others and yourself, allows you to predict behavior far more accurately than listening to stated intentions. Context matters more than content. People adjust their performance based on who's watching and what's at stake. The same person behaves differently with superiors versus subordinates, in public versus private, when they need something versus when they don't. Watch how someone behaves when they have power versus when they don't, how they treat people they need versus people they don't, how they act when being observed versus when they think no one's watching. The variations reveal what's performance and what's genuine. This doesn't mean everyone is fake or untrustworthy. It means everyone is more complex than their conscious self-image, operating from patterns and needs they don't fully understand. The person who can see beneath the surface, who can read the unspoken, notice the inconsistencies, track the patterns, operates with far more accurate information than people who take everything at face value. Think about the practical applications. In hiring or partnerships, don't just listen to what candidates or potential partners say about themselves. Check references obsessively, but ask the right questions. How do they handle conflict? How do they treat people with less power? What happened in their previous relationships? Look for patterns of behavior across time and contexts. This aligns with Greene's The 48 Laws of Power. Law, verse 19. Know who you're dealing with. Do not offend the wrong person. In negotiations, watch what the other party does more than what they say. Are they creating artificial urgency? Being vague on details? Making promises contingent on future conditions? These behaviors tell you more than their stated positions. In relationships, words are cheap and easily deployed. I love you. I'll change. You can trust me. These cost nothing to say. Watch whether actions align with words over time. Does their behavior demonstrate care, respect, and reliability, or are you being asked to believe words that contradict patterns? In assessing leaders, don't evaluate leaders based on their vision statements or public persona. Watch how they make decisions under pressure, how they handle dissent, how they treat people who can't help them, whether they keep commitments when it's inconvenient. The person skilled at reading people accurately develops several habits. They observe more than they speak. They're gathering data constantly, watching interactions, noting patterns, paying attention to small details others dismiss. They ask questions designed to reveal behavior, not just collect words. They trust patterns over promises. One action doesn't define someone, but patterns do. They look for what someone does repeatedly, not what they claim they'll do differently this time. They notice what's not said, the topics someone avoids, the questions they deflect, the details that remain vague. These absences are often more revealing than what's explicitly stated. They calibrate constantly. They test their readings against reality. When they misread someone, they study what they missed. They refine their ability to distinguish signal from noise, genuine from performance. This skill doesn't develop overnight. It requires patience, observation, and willingness to see people as they are rather than as you wish them to be. But once developed, it's perhaps the most valuable capability for navigating human systems. Maria saved herself months or years of misery by reading what the CEO revealed through small inconsistencies rather than believing his polished pitch. Tom paid a heavy price for taking words at face value and ignoring behavioral red flags. The question is which path you'll take, believing the performance or reading the truth beneath it. The invitation to observe. Reading people accurately is a learnable skill, but it requires shifting from passive acceptance to active observation. Here are the questions that develop this capacity. What patterns do you see in someone's behavior over time? Don't judge people based on single interactions or stated intentions. Track what they do repeatedly. How do they consistently handle conflict? Treat people with less power. Respond to criticism. Keep commitments. Patterns reveal truth. Promises reveal wishes. What small inconsistencies are you dismissing? When someone's words and actions don't quite align, even on minor things, your brain registers it, but you often rationalize it away. Notice these moments. The colleague who says they value your input, but talks over you. The friend who claims they're happy for your success, but subtly undermines it. The partner who says they want intimacy, but consistently chooses distance. These small mismatches are data. Use them. How does this person behave under pressure? Anyone can be pleasant when things are easy. Watch what happens when someone is stressed, criticized, losing, or tempted. Do they blame others? Get defensive? Cut corners? Lash out? Or do they stay principled? These moments reveal operating systems, not performances. What does their past behavior predict about future behavior? The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior in similar contexts. Someone who betrayed trust in a previous relationship will likely do it again. Someone who's consistently reliable will likely remain so. People can change, but it's rare and effortful. Assume continuity unless there's strong evidence of transformation. What are they not saying, and why? Notice the gaps. The important details left vague. The deflected questions, the topics they avoid. These silences often matter more than the words that fill the space. What are they protecting? What don't they want you to see? What do their small, unguarded actions reveal? Pay attention to behavior when the stakes feel low. How they treat servers, how they handle small frustrations, how they respond to minor inconveniences, whether they keep small commitments. These reveal character more than big gestures in high-stakes moments. What needs are driving their behavior? Beneath stated motivations, what emotional needs seem to be operating? The need for validation, control, security, significance, connection. Once you identify someone's core needs, their behavior becomes far more predictable. They'll compromise stated values to meet these needs every time. Develop the practice of observation. In your next important conversation, spend more time watching than talking. Notice body language shifts. Track what makes someone defensive or enthusiastic. Pay attention to inconsistencies between what they say and how they say it. Keep a journal of your readings of key people in your life. Write down your observations and predictions. Then check them against reality over time. Where were you accurate? Where did you miss signals? This feedback loop trains your instinct. Remember, this isn't about becoming suspicious or cynical. It's about seeing clearly. Some people will reveal themselves to be more trustworthy than their words suggested. Their actions demonstrate deeper integrity than they claim. Others will reveal the opposite. Either way, you're operating with accurate information rather than comfortable illusions. And in a world where most people prefer comfortable illusions, clear sight is a profound advantage. The truth is always there in behavior. The question is whether you're watching closely enough to see it. Chapter 5. Build an Unshakable Reputation. The Historical Mirror. In 1985, Warren Buffett faced a decision that would define his legacy. Salomon Brothers, one of Wall Street's most powerful investment banks, had engaged in a treasury bond scandal. Buffett was on the board, but hadn't been involved in the fraud. He could have quietly distanced himself, protected his interests, and let the institution collapse. Instead, he did something almost no one in his position would do. He took full responsibility. He testified before Congress, didn't hide behind lawyers, and spent months personally rebuilding trust with regulators and clients. He told the truth even when it was costly. He admitted what went wrong without deflection or spin. The scandal could have destroyed his reputation. Instead, it cemented it. Decades later, Buffett's integrity became almost cliché, the foundation of his power and influence. Institutions trusted him with billions because they knew he'd protect reputation over short-term profit every single time. Contrast this with Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. She built a health technology company valued at $9 billion based on claims that were, at best, exaggerated, and at worst, completely fraudulent. For years, she maintained the illusion through aggressive legal threats, secrecy, and carefully managed public appearances. She looked the part. Black turtlenecks, deep voice, compelling vision. But reputation built on performance rather than substance is a house of cards. When journalists and whistleblowers revealed the truth, everything collapsed instantly. The board members who'd lent their names resigned. The investors lost billions. Holmes went from magazine covers to criminal conviction. One leader spent decades building reputation through consistent character. The other built it through image management and deception. When tested, only one remained standing. The difference? Buffett understood what Holmes never grasped. Reputation isn't what you say about yourself. It's what others say about you when you're not in the room. And that's determined by what you do consistently over years, particularly when no one's watching. The modern echo. James and Lisa both started as account managers at the same consulting firm. Both were talented. Both wanted to advance. Both understood that reputation mattered. Their approaches diverged completely. James optimized for visibility. He made sure his name was on high-profile projects, even when his contribution was minimal. He spoke up in meetings whether he had valuable input or not. He built relationships with executives, but was dismissive of junior colleagues who couldn't help his career. When projects succeeded, he positioned himself at the center. When they failed, he distanced himself quickly. In the short term, it worked. He got promoted faster than Lisa. His name was known. He looked successful. Lisa took a different approach. She did what she said she would do, every single time, even on small commitments. When she didn't know something, she admitted it, instead of bluffing. She gave credit generously to her team. She took on unglamorous projects that needed doing. She was the same person with the CEO as she was with the intern. 5 years in, their trajectories crossed. James had hit a ceiling. His reputation had caught up with him. People knew he took credit for others' work, that his word wasn't reliable, that he cared more about appearance than substance. When he interviewed for senior roles, back-channel references destroyed his chances. People were polite to his face, but warned each other about him privately. Lisa, meanwhile, became the person everyone wanted on their most important projects. When executives needed someone they could trust completely, they called her. When other firms tried to recruit her, her company promoted her to keep her. Her reputation had become her most valuable asset, and it was unassailable because it was earned through thousands of small, consistent actions. I watched James try to build a reputation through self-promotion, Lisa reflected. But reputation isn't built, it's earned. And it's earned through what you do when it doesn't seem to matter. through keeping commitments no one's tracking, through being the same person when no one important is watching. The principle: reputation is your most valuable currency. In the 48 Laws of Power, Law number 5, so much depends on reputation, guard it with your life. Robert Greene argues that reputation is the cornerstone of power. Once established, it becomes self-reinforcing, opening doors, creating opportunities, and giving you benefit of the doubt in ambiguous situations. But once damaged, it requires extraordinary effort to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. This isn't abstract. Your reputation is the filter through which everything you do is interpreted. The exact same action is viewed completely differently depending on whether you have a reputation for integrity or manipulation, competence or carelessness, reliability or flakiness. Consider two people who make the same mistake. One has a reputation for excellence. People assume it's an aberration, give them grace, and move on. The other has a reputation for cutting corners. People see it as confirmation of their suspicions, and trust erodes further. Same action, completely different consequences, entirely because of reputation. Greene emphasizes several critical truths about reputation. Reputation is built slowly and destroyed quickly. Buffett spent 50 years building trust through consistent integrity. It could have been destroyed in a single scandal if he'd handled it differently. You need thousands of actions to build reputation, but a single major failure of character can demolish it. The asymmetry is brutal, which is why Greene insists you must guard it obsessively. Reputation precedes you everywhere. Before you walk into a room, people have already decided who you are based on what they've heard. Before the interview, before the negotiation, before the collaboration, your reputation has already set the frame. This means you're never starting from neutral. You're starting from wherever your reputation places you. What you're known for determines what opportunities reach you. If you're known for integrity, people bring you opportunities where integrity matters. If you're known for execution, you get projects that require flawless delivery. If you're known for drama and unreliability, you get excluded from opportunities that require trust. Your reputation becomes a filter that determines which doors open and which remain closed. You can't fully control your reputation, but you absolutely influence it. You don't control what people say about you, but you control what you consistently do. And over time, that shapes what people say. The gap between who you are and what you're known for eventually closes. People figure out the truth. The question is whether the truth works for you or against you. As Greene explores in The Laws of Human Nature, Law number 2, transforms self-love into empathy. Building authentic reputation requires thinking beyond your immediate self-interest. You must consider how your actions land on others, how you're perceived over time, what story your pattern of behavior tells. This requires the self-awareness from Chapter 1. You can't manage reputation if you don't understand how you're actually showing up. The person who builds an unshakable reputation follows specific patterns. They keep commitments religiously, especially small ones. Most people are good at keeping major commitments when everyone's watching. The person building reputation is equally reliable on minor commitments when no one cares. They return calls when they say they will. They show up on time. They deliver what they promised, even when circumstances change. These small consistencies accumulate into ironclad reputation. They admit mistakes openly and fix them quickly. When they're wrong, they say so clearly and take responsibility. No deflection, no excuses, no blame shifting. This counterintuitively strengthens reputation because it demonstrates that their word can be trusted even when it's costly. Buffett's response to Salomon Brothers is the template: full transparency, complete ownership, immediate corrective action. They give credit generously and take blame privately. Success is shared publicly. Failures are addressed personally. This builds loyalty and respect. People know you won't throw them under the bus, which makes them willing to take risks with you. It also creates a reputation for strength. Only secure people can be genuinely generous with credit. They're consistent across contexts. The same person with the CEO as with the janitor. The same integrity under pressure as when things are easy. The same character in public as in private. Inconsistency destroys reputation because it reveals that your behavior is situational performance, not genuine character. Greene discusses this in the 48 Laws of Power. Law 38. Think as you like, but behave like others. While you should adapt your style to contexts, your core character must remain consistent, or people will spot the performance. They protect others' reputations generously. They don't gossip, don't share confidences. Don't undermine people who aren't present. This creates a reputation as someone safe to trust with sensitive information. People know that if you protect others' reputations, you'll protect theirs. They deliver more than they promise. Underpromise and overdeliver becomes their pattern. They set realistic expectations and then exceed them consistently. This is the opposite of the person who makes grand commitments and delivers excuses. One approach builds reputation incrementally, the other destroys it steadily. Think about the practical implications. In your career, your reputation determines which opportunities you're considered for before you even know they exist. The senior executive who needs someone trustworthy doesn't post a job. They call the person whose reputation precedes them. Most of the best opportunities never reach the open market. They go to people whose reputation has already earned them the role. In business, your reputation becomes a competitive advantage worth more than marketing budgets. Buffett can raise capital instantly because his reputation makes him trustworthy. A company with a reputation for quality charges premium prices. A professional with a reputation for excellence has clients seeking them out. In relationships, your reputation for how you treat people determines who wants to be in relationship with you. If you're known for loyalty, you attract loyal people. If you're known for drama, you attract chaos. Your reputation creates a selection filter for who enters your life. In crisis, when things go wrong, and they will, your reputation determines whether people give you benefit of doubt or assume the worst. Buffett got through Salomon Brothers because his reputation bought him credibility when he needed it most. The person building reputation for the long term makes short-term sacrifices that others won't. They turn down profitable opportunities that would compromise integrity, admit mistakes that could have been hidden, keep commitments even when circumstances make it costly, treat people well even when there's no immediate benefit, build trust through consistency when it would be easier to take shortcuts. This feels like a disadvantage in the moment. You're losing the deal, admitting the failure, honoring the commitment, helping someone who can't reciprocate. But these moments are precisely what build unassailable reputation. People notice, they remember, and they tell others. James learned this too late. His strategy of managing appearance while cutting corners worked until people compared notes. Then his reputation collapsed all at once because it had no foundation. Lisa's approach seemed slower, but it was actually faster. She built something that couldn't be taken away. As Greene emphasizes in the 48 Laws of Power, Law No. 5, once reputation is lost, it takes extraordinary effort to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. Far better to guard it religiously from the start than to try to repair it after damage. Your reputation is always being built or destroyed through your daily actions. There's no neutral. Every interaction either reinforces or undermines what you're known for. The question is whether you're being intentional about it. The invitation to build. What are you actually known for, and is that what you want to be known for? Most people have never asked this question directly. They assume they're known for what they think they project. Test this assumption. Ask 5 people who know you in different contexts. What would you say I'm known for? Don't ask what they think of you. That's different. Ask what they think others would say about you. The answers will reveal your actual reputation, not your intended one. The gap between the two is your work. Track your commitments for 1 month. Every promise, every deadline, every "I'll get back to you." Write them all down. Then track which ones you kept fully, which ones you kept partially, which ones you forgot. This reveals whether your reputation for reliability is earned or aspirational. Most people discover they're far less consistent than they believed. What story do your small actions tell? Forget the big visible moves. Look at the small moments when it doesn't seem to matter. Do you show up on time? Return messages promptly? Give credit where it's due? Admit when you're wrong? Treat people well when there's no benefit? These small consistencies, or inconsistencies, are what actually build reputation. Where are you sacrificing reputation for short-term gain? Taking credit you didn't fully earn? Exaggerating capabilities to win opportunities? Making commitments you're not confident you can keep? Breaking small promises because it doesn't really matter? Each of these trades long-term reputation for immediate advantage. Sometimes that's necessary. Usually it's just short-sighted. Who have you undermined or gossiped about, and what does that say about your reputation? If you'll speak about others negatively when they're not present, people assume you'll do the same to them. If you share confidences others trusted you with, people know you'll share theirs. Your reputation for trustworthiness is determined by how you treat people who can't defend themselves in the moment. What would you need to do consistently for 3 years to build the reputation you actually want? Not what sounds impressive, but what you could actually sustain through thousands of small daily actions. Write it down specifically. Then ask, am I willing to do this even when no one's watching, even when it costs me, even when the benefit isn't immediate? Begin today. Pick one commitment, even a small one, and keep it perfectly. Then another. Then another. String together enough perfect commitments, and you've built a reputation for reliability. Handle one mistake with complete transparency and ownership. Then another. String together enough honest accounts of your failures, and you've built a reputation for integrity. The person with an unshakable reputation hasn't avoided mistakes. They've handled them impeccably. They haven't been perfect. They've been consistent. They haven't controlled what others say. They've controlled what they repeatedly do. Reputation is the compound interest of character. It builds slowly through small, consistent deposits. But once established, it becomes your most valuable asset. Opening doors, creating trust, and giving you power that can't be bought or faked. James tried to build reputation through performance. Lisa built it through character. Only one approach survives scrutiny over time. The choice, as always, is yours. But choose knowing this. Your reputation is being built right now, whether you're intentional about it or not. The only question is what you're building. Chapter 6. Make yourself invaluable. The historical mirror. In the 1930s, 2 men worked for Walt Disney during the studio's most critical period. One was Ub Iwerks, a brilliant animator who'd co-created Mickey Mouse with Disney. The other was a young animator named Walt Stanchfield, who'd later become legendary but started as just another employee. Iwerks was technically superior to almost everyone at the studio. He could animate faster and with more precision than anyone else. He knew it, and he made sure Disney knew it. When Iwerks left to start his own studio in 1930, backed by significant financing, he expected Disney to struggle without him. After all, he was the best animator they had. Disney barely noticed. Within months, the studio had replaced Iwerks' technical skills with other talented animators. What Iwerks had offered was replicable excellence, impressive, but not unique. His technical brilliance was a commodity that could be substituted. Meanwhile, people like Stanchfield made themselves invaluable not through superior technique alone, but by understanding the studio's broader vision and developing capacities others couldn't replicate. Stanchfield became the person who could teach the Disney style to new animators, who understood character development at a deeper level, who could bridge Walt's vision with practical execution. He became structurally embedded in how the studio functioned. Iwerks' studio failed within a few years. He eventually returned to Disney, humbled, in a supporting role. Stanchfield stayed for decades, became one of the most influential animation teachers in history, and his insights shaped the industry long after he was gone. The difference. Iwerks believed technical superiority made him indispensable. Stanchfield understood that true indispensability comes from creating value so unique and embedded that your absence creates a void others can't easily fill. Compare this to someone like Quincy Jones, who produced Michael Jackson's most successful albums. Jones didn't just have technical production skills. Many producers did. What made him invaluable was his unique combination of musical genius across genres, ability to manage Jackson's perfectionism, network of the best musicians in the world, and understanding of commercial success. No single person could replace what Jones brought. The combination was irreplaceable. When you're replaceable, you have no leverage. When you're invaluable, opportunities seek you out. The modern echo. 2 software engineers joined a tech startup within months of each other. Both were Stanford graduates, both could code well, both wanted to advance. Michael focused on being the best engineer in the room. He wrote clean code, shipped features fast, and stayed current on the latest frameworks. He was good at his job, sometimes the best on the team technically. When promotion time came, he pointed to his technical superiority and expected recognition. He was passed over. When he asked why, his manager was direct. "You're a strong engineer, but if you left tomorrow, we'd hire another strong engineer and be fine within a month. You haven't made yourself essential to anything that matters strategically." Priya took a different approach. She noticed the company struggled with a critical problem. The sales and engineering teams barely communicated, leading to misaligned product development and frustrated customers. She realized no one else had both the technical depth and communication skills to bridge this gap. She made it her mission to become that bridge. She started attending sales calls to understand customer needs directly. She translated technical concepts for the sales team and customer pain points for engineers. She created documentation and processes that didn't exist. She became the person both teams needed to function effectively together. Within 2 years, Priya was promoted to VP of Product, not because she was the best coder, but because she'd made herself invaluable to the company's core challenge. Her unique combination of skills created value no one else could easily provide. Michael optimized for being good at a common skill, she explained. I optimized for being uniquely valuable at solving a critical problem. Good engineers are everywhere. People who can bridge technical and commercial realities are rare. The principle, indispensability, comes from unique essential value. In the 48 Laws of Power, Law Number 11, learn to keep people dependent on you. Robert Greene argues that your security and power depend on making yourself needed. But not just needed in a way that can't easily be replaced. The person who is merely competent is always vulnerable. The person who is genuinely invaluable has leverage, opportunity, and security. This isn't about manipulation or creating artificial dependency. It's about strategic positioning, identifying where you can create unique value, and developing capabilities that make you structurally essential. Greene emphasizes that indispensability isn't about being the best at something common. It's about being uniquely positioned to solve problems that matter. Being good at what many people can do makes you replaceable. If your value proposition is, I'm a strong accountant, engineer, marketer, consultant, you're competing in a commodity market. Organizations can find another strong practitioner relatively easily. Your bargaining power is limited because your value is fungible. Being uniquely good at what few can do makes you invaluable. When you develop a rare combination of skills, solve a critical problem no one else can address, or create value that's structurally embedded in how things work, you become irreplaceable. Not because you're perfect, but because the cost and risk of replacing you is prohibitively high. As Greene explores throughout Mastery, true indispensability emerges when you combine disparate skills into unique capability. Quincy Jones wasn't just a producer, or just a musician, or just a businessman. He was all three in rare combination. Priya wasn't just technical or just customer-focused. She bridged both. The combination is what creates unique value. Most people try to be best in class at one skill. Smart strategists develop rare combinations, solve problems others can't or won't solve. There are always critical problems organizations face that no one wants to deal with. They're too complex, too political, too tedious. The person who can solve these becomes invaluable because they're addressing real pain points. Priya saw the sales engineering gap that everyone complained about but no one fixed. Make yourself structurally embedded. The most invaluable people don't just do tasks. They create systems, relationships, and knowledge that become load-bearing structures for how things work. When Stanchfield became the keeper of the Disney style and the teacher of new animators, he wasn't just doing a job. He was embedded in how the studio functioned. Removing him would require rebuilding systems. Develop rare judgment, not just rare skills. Technical skills can be taught and replicated. Judgment, knowing what matters, when to act, how to navigate complexity, is harder to transfer. The person who develops judgment in their domain becomes the person others turn to for decisions that matter. This is what Greene calls in the 48 Laws of Power, Law Number 27, play on people's need to believe to create a cult-like following, the creation of unique authority, control access to critical resources or relationships. This must be done ethically, but the person who becomes the essential link to key customers, stakeholders, knowledge, or capabilities gains structural importance. Not through hoarding, but through being the trusted intermediary that others need. Think about what makes someone genuinely invaluable versus merely competent. The competent employee does their job well, meets expectations consistently, can be replaced with another good practitioner within a reasonable time frame. The invaluable employee solves problems no one else can, has relationships that would take years to rebuild, possesses rare combinations of knowledge, has become structurally necessary to how critical functions operate. The difference shows up in leverage. The competent person negotiates from a weak position. I do good work and deserve a raise has limited power because good work is expected and can be found elsewhere. The invaluable person doesn't need to negotiate aggressively. Organizations proactively offer them what they need to stay because the cost of losing them is too high. They have offers from elsewhere not because they're promoting themselves, but because their value is obvious and rare. As Greene discusses in The Laws of Human Nature, Law for 13, Advance with a Sense of Purpose, Becoming invaluable requires strategic intentionality. You must identify what's actually critical versus what's just busy work. Most people confuse activity with impact. They optimize for being busy rather than being essential. The invaluable person identifies the problems that truly matter, the ones that, if solved, create outsized value, and makes those their focus. Develop capabilities in the direction of scarcity. If everyone in your organization can do something, it's not where you build indispensability. Find the intersection of what matters strategically, what's rare or missing, and what aligns with your natural aptitudes. That's where you become invaluable. Make your value visible without self-promotion. The work speaks for itself when you're solving real problems. You don't need to campaign for recognition. People notice when critical issues are resolved, when things work that didn't before, when you've removed obstacles others couldn't. Build the capabilities of others while remaining essential. The most secure and valuable people aren't hoarders. They teach, they document, they develop others. But they remain essential because their judgment, their network, their strategic understanding can't be fully transferred. They're generous with knowledge while remaining unique in capability. Stay ahead of commoditization. What makes you invaluable today might be common tomorrow. Technology changes, skills spread, problems get solved. The person who remains invaluable continuously develops new rare capabilities, as old ones become common. They're always moving toward the next frontier of unique value. The path to invaluability isn't mysterious. 1. Identify critical unsolved problems in your domain. 2. Develop rare combinations of skills that address them. 3. Become structurally embedded in solving them. 4. Build judgment others trust. 5. Continuously evolve toward new rare capabilities. Michael failed because he optimized for being good at something common. iWorks failed because he believed technical superiority alone created indispensability. Both were replaceable because their value could be substituted relatively easily. Priya succeeded because she identified a critical gap and made herself the unique solution. Stanchfield succeeded because he became structurally embedded in how the studio functioned. Quincy Jones succeeded because his combination of capabilities was irreplaceable. The invaluable person isn't necessarily the most talented. They're the most strategically positioned. They've made themselves essential to what matters. The invitation to position. What would make you genuinely irreplaceable in your current context? Not what makes you good, but what would make you invaluable. What critical problems does your organization face that no one is solving well? Not the problems people complain about casually, but the problems that, if solved, would create significant value. Make a list, then ask, which of these could I uniquely solve given my combination of capabilities, access, and interests? What rare combination of skills could you develop? Look at your current capabilities and experiences. What non-obvious combination would create unique value? Not being great at one thing, but being good at multiple things that rarely coexist. The engineer who understands customers. The salesperson who understands operations. The creative who understands business metrics. Where are you currently replaceable, and why? Be honest. If you left tomorrow, could someone with similar credentials do your job within a few months? If yes, you're in a commodity position. That's not necessarily bad, but it's not invaluable. What would need to change for your absence to create a significant void? Who depends on you for what, and is that dependency valuable? Make a list of people who rely on you and what they rely on you for. Is it for things that are critical and rare, or for things that are routine and replicable? The person who's needed for unique judgment and critical connections has real leverage. The person who's needed for routine tasks is just busy. What could you become the undisputed expert in? Not in your industry broadly, but in your specific context. What problem, domain, or capability could you master so thoroughly that you become the go-to authority? This doesn't require decades. It requires focused depth in the right direction. What systems, relationships, or knowledge could you develop that become load-bearing? How could you make yourself structurally embedded rather than just functionally useful? The person who's done the task can be replaced. The person who's built the system, developed the relationships, and holds the institutional knowledge is invaluable. Start today. Pick one critical unsolved problem in your organization. Not the easiest one, but the one that matters most and that you could uniquely address. Make solving it your focus for the next 6 months. Simultaneously, identify one rare combination of skills you could develop. Not just getting better at what you already do, but adding a complementary capability that creates unique value. Document what you learn, teach others what you can, Build systems that last. But do it in a way that makes your judgment, your network, and your strategic understanding irreplaceable, even as you share knowledge freely. The invaluable person isn't worried about being replaced because they're continuously creating new value that didn't exist before. They're not holding positions. They're building capabilities that make them essential. Michael learned this lesson too late. He'd spent years perfecting a commodity skill, while Priya spent years building unique value. When the market shifted, when the company faced new challenges, only one of them remained essential. You're either building toward indispensability or accepting replaceability. There's no neutral ground. The choice is which direction you're moving. Part 3. Execute with strategy. Chapter 7. Choose your battles wisely. The historical mirror. In 1940, Winston Churchill faced an impossible situation. France had fallen. Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany. His military advisors presented plans for various defensive operations, each one demanding resources Britain didn't have. Every front seemed critical. Every threat seemed existential. Churchill did something that felt cowardly to many. He chose. He decided which battles mattered and which didn't. When Mussolini invaded Greece, Churchill sent limited support but refused to commit fully. It wasn't the decisive theater. When Japan threatened British interests in Asia, he made the agonizing choice to prioritize Europe and accept losses elsewhere. When generals wanted to defend every inch of the empire, he focused on the battles that would determine Britain's survival. His critics called it surrender. Churchill called it strategy. He understood that fighting every battle guarantees you lose the war. Energy, resources, and attention are finite. The leader who tries to win everywhere wins nowhere. The strategist identifies which battles are actually decisive and concentrates force there. By choosing his battles ruthlessly, Churchill survived long enough for allies to enter the war. Britain lost territory, lost battles, made painful compromises. But it won the war that mattered. Contrast this with General George Custer at Little Bighorn. He saw every challenge as an opportunity to prove himself. When scouts reported massive numbers of Sioux and Cheyenne warriors, far more than expected, Custer refused to wait for reinforcements. His ego wouldn't allow retreat or delay. He divided his already outnumbered force and attacked immediately. It was a slaughter. Custer and over 260 men died because he couldn't distinguish between a battle worth fighting and one that would destroy him. His need to engage every challenge, to never back down, to always attack, this made him predictable, reckless, and ultimately dead. One leader chose his battles based on strategic value. The other fought every battle based on ego. Only one survived. As Greene explores in the 33 Strategies of War, Strategy 17, use the surrender tactic, transform weakness into power. Sometimes the most powerful move is choosing not to fight. Not because you're weak, but because you're strategic about where your strength matters most. The modern echo. Sarah and David both worked at a large corporation known for its political culture. Both were talented. Both faced constant battles. Budget fights, territorial disputes, credit stealing, philosophical disagreements about strategy. Their approaches diverged completely. David fought everything. When someone questioned his decision, he defended it aggressively. When another department encroached on his territory, he escalated. When he disagreed with leadership's direction, he made his objections known publicly. He prided himself on never backing down, on always standing his ground. 3 years in, David was exhausted and stuck. He'd won some battles but made countless enemies. People avoided working with him because everything became a fight. Leadership saw him as difficult. His energy was depleted by constant conflict. He'd spent years fighting, but his career had gone nowhere. Sarah took a different approach. She assessed every potential conflict through a simple filter. Is this battle worth the energy, relationships, and capital it will cost? Will winning it materially advance what I'm trying to achieve? Most conflicts failed this test. When someone took credit for her work in a meeting, she let it go. Not worth the fight. And people who mattered already knew the truth. When a colleague disagreed with her approach, she often conceded if the stakes were low. When her boss made a decision she thought was wrong but not catastrophic, she implemented it without complaint. But when battles mattered, when they involved her team's core mission, when resources critical to success were at stake, when principles that defined her work were threatened, she fought with complete focus and won decisively. She'd saved her credibility, relationships, and energy for conflicts that actually mattered. 5 years in, Sarah was a senior director. People respected her because when she pushed back, it meant something. Leadership trusted her judgment because she didn't fight everything. Her team was loyal because she protected what mattered to them, not her ego. David thought fighting everything made him strong, Sarah reflected. It just made him exhausting. Real strength is knowing which battles determine the war and focusing everything there. The principle: energy is finite. Spend it on what matters. In the 33 strategies of war, strategy.17, use the surrender tactic, and strategy.23, weave a seamless blend of fact and fiction. Robert Greene argues that the strategic person understands that every battle has costs: energy, relationships, credibility, attention, time. The person who fights indiscriminately exhausts their resources and ends up too weak for the battles that actually matter. This isn't about cowardice or avoiding conflict. It's about strategic allocation of finite resources. As Greene emphasizes in the 48 Laws of Power, Law 22, use the surrender tactic. Transform weakness into power. Sometimes yielding in the short term preserves strength for the long term. The person who can't choose their battles makes predictable mistakes. They exhaust themselves on conflicts that don't matter. Every slight, every disagreement, every territorial dispute becomes a hill to die on. They spend enormous energy winning battles that have no strategic value. Meanwhile, they're too depleted to fight effectively when something genuinely important is at stake. They make unnecessary enemies. Each battle creates casualties, people who remember being fought, who feel attacked, who wait for opportunities to return the favor. The person who fights everything accumulates enemies on all sides. Eventually, they're surrounded by opposition they created unnecessarily. They lose credibility through overuse. When you fight everything, people stop taking your objections seriously. You become the person who always complains, always resists, always makes things difficult. Then, when you identify something that genuinely matters, no one listens because you've cried wolf too many times. They become predictable and exploitable. If people know you'll fight every challenge, they can manipulate you by creating conflicts that drain you. You become easy to distract, easy to exhaust, easy to defeat simply by making you fight battles that serve your opponent's interests, not yours. They confuse activity with achievement. Fighting feels productive. It feels like strength, like taking a stand, like mattering. But if the battles don't advance your actual objectives, you're just busy losing. Motion without strategic direction is wasted energy. The strategic person operates differently. They have a clear hierarchy of what matters. Not everything is equally important. They know which outcomes are essential, which are preferred but negotiable, and which are truly irrelevant. This clarity allows them to make rapid decisions about where to invest energy. As Greene discusses in the Laws of Human Nature, Law 13, advance with a sense of purpose. Having a clear sense of purpose allows you to ignore distractions that don't serve your deeper goals. They calculate the full cost of engagement. Before entering a conflict, they assess, what will this cost in energy, relationships, credibility, and time? What's the realistic probability of winning? What happens if I win versus if I lose? Often, even winnable battles aren't worth fighting because the cost exceeds the value. They're willing to lose battles to win wars. Churchill gave up territory. Sarah let colleagues take credit. These weren't defeats. They were strategic choices to preserve resources for conflicts that mattered more. The person obsessed with never losing anything ends up losing everything because they can't prioritize. They make their rare battles count because they fight selectively. When they do engage, it's with complete focus and accumulated capital. They're not exhausted from previous conflicts. They haven't made unnecessary enemies. Their credibility is intact. They can bring full force to bear on the battles they've chosen. They use surrender tactically. Sometimes, appearing to yield gives you advantages. You learn your opponent's plans. You avoid exhaustion. You look reasonable while your opponent looks aggressive. You can regroup and attack later from a stronger position. This is the core insight of Greene's The 48 Laws of Power. Law 22. Surrender can be a weapon if used strategically. Think about what this means practically. In your career, most workplace conflicts are ego-driven noise. The colleague who disagrees with your approach. The boss who doesn't recognize your contribution. The peer who takes credit. Many of these don't materially affect your actual objectives. The person who fights all of them is exhausted and isolated. The person who identifies which battles advance their career and ignores the rest conserves energy and credibility for when it matters. In relationships, every relationship has friction. Your partner does things that annoy you. Friends make choices you disagree with. Family members have opinions you find wrong. If you address every irritation, you're in constant conflict. The strategic person identifies which issues threaten the relationship's core value and addresses those. Everything else is noise. In building anything meaningful, every project attracts criticism, obstacles, and people who disagree. If you respond to all of it, you're not building, you're just defending. The strategic creator identifies which feedback improves the work and which is irrelevant, which obstacles must be overcome and which can be circumvented, which critics matter and which can be ignored. The process of choosing battles. Ask, does this conflict advance my actual objectives? Not your ego, not your sense of fairness, not your desire to be right. Your actual strategic goals. If winning this battle doesn't materially move you toward what you're trying to achieve, it's probably not worth fighting. Calculate the full cost of engagement. Time, energy, relationships damaged, credibility spent, opportunity cost of what you're not doing while fighting. Compare this to the value of winning. Often, the cost exceeds the value, even if you'd win. Consider, will this matter in a year? Many conflicts feel urgent but have no lasting impact. The person who can distinguish between genuinely important and merely immediately irritating saves enormous energy. Assess your current strength. If you're already exhausted from previous battles, even important conflicts might need to wait until you've recovered. Fighting from a weakened position often leads to losses you could have avoided by timing your battles better. Look for alternatives to direct conflict. Can you achieve the same objective by going around the obstacle rather than through it? Can you address this later from a stronger position? Can you let time and circumstances handle it without your involvement? Direct confrontation is often the least efficient path. Churchill didn't avoid every fight. He chose the ones that determined Britain's survival and committed everything to those. Sarah didn't back down from all conflicts. She identified which battles advanced her team's mission and her career, and fought those with complete focus. David and Custer fought everything their ego told them was important. They confused constant fighting with strength, never backing down with courage, engagement with achievement. They exhausted themselves winning tactical battles while losing strategic wars. The invitation to choose. Where are you wasting energy on battles that don't matter? Most people have never conducted this audit. They fight reflexively, react emotionally, engage because they feel they should, not because strategy demands it. List every current conflict or potential conflict in your life. Work disagreements, relationship tensions, philosophical disputes, whatever energy you're spending on opposition or friction. Write them all down. For each one, ask, if I win this battle completely, what materially changes? Not how you'll feel, but what actually changes in outcomes that matter to your strategic objectives. Many conflicts, even if won decisively, change nothing important. What is this costing you in energy, relationships, credibility, and opportunity? Add up the real costs. The time spent, the energy depleted, the relationships strained, the things you're not doing because you're fighting this. Is the cost worth the potential gain? Which 3 battles, if won, would most advance your actual goals? Not the ones that feel most urgent or most offensive to your ego. The ones that, if resolved in your favor, materially improve your strategic position. Everything else is a distraction from these 3. What are you fighting because of ego rather than strategy? The need to be right. The need to be seen as strong. The inability to let slights go. The refusal to ever back down. These ego-driven battles drain resources without advancing objectives. Identify them honestly. Where could tactical surrender give you strategic advantage? What if you conceded this point, yielded this territory, accepted this loss? Would it preserve energy, avoid making enemies, let you regroup, create space to attack elsewhere? Sometimes surrendering the battle wins the war. Pick one battle you're currently fighting that, honestly, doesn't matter. Let it go. Concede. Surrender. Not because you're weak, but because you're strategic. Feel the energy you just freed up. Now identify one battle that genuinely matters. One where winning materially advances what you're trying to achieve. Commit to that one with everything you've saved by not fighting the irrelevant conflicts. The strategic person isn't constantly in battle. They're carefully, patiently positioning themselves, conserving resources, waiting for the moments that actually matter. Then they strike with decisive force because they're not exhausted from fighting everything else. David spent 5 years exhausted from constant battle and ended up nowhere. Sarah spent 5 years choosing her battles carefully and ended up in leadership. Churchill fought selectively and saved Britain. Custer fought recklessly and got his entire command killed. You have finite energy, finite credibility, finite time. Every battle you fight spends these resources. The question isn't whether you're willing to fight. The question is whether you're strategic enough to choose which battles are worth fighting, and disciplined enough to let everything else go. The war is won by those who know which battles determine the outcome. Everything else is noise. Chapter 8. Turn obstacles into fuel. The historical mirror. Thomas Edison was going deaf. By his 30s, he could barely hear conversations. For most people, this would be a career-ending disability, especially for someone working on sound recording technology. The phonograph was one of his major inventions. Edison saw it differently. He later wrote that his deafness was a great advantage, because it allowed him to concentrate completely without distraction from ambient noise. While others were interrupted by every sound, Edison worked in perfect silence, diving deeper into problems than hearing people could. His limitation became his edge. When his laboratory burned down in 1914, destroying years of work and prototypes worth millions, Edison was 67 years old. He watched the fire and told his son, "Go get your mother and all her friends. They'll never see a fire like this again." The next morning, he was rebuilding. "There is great value in disaster," he said. "All our mistakes are burned up. Thank God we can start anew." He turned catastrophic loss into opportunity by refusing to see it as defeat. Within weeks, he'd redesigned systems, eliminated inefficiencies he'd tolerated for years, and emerged with a better operation than before the fire. Compare this to the countless inventors and entrepreneurs who faced similar obstacles and simply quit. The ones who saw hearing loss as disqualifying, who saw fires as endings, who interpreted every constraint as evidence they should stop. They had the same obstacles. They just couldn't transform them into fuel. As Greene explores in the 50th Law, written with 50 Cent. Chapter 1. See things for what they are. In tense realism, the difference between those who succeed and those who fail often comes down to how they interpret obstacles. The person who sees constraints as insurmountable stops. The person who sees them as problems to solve continues, and often finds advantages others missed. The modern echo. When Maya started her catering business, she had almost no capital. Established competitors had fully equipped kitchens, delivery vehicles, and staffs. She had her apartment kitchen, a borrowed car, and herself. Most people told her the capital requirements made entry impossible. She couldn't compete on their terms, so she didn't try. Instead, she turned her constraints into differentiators. Because she couldn't afford to stock inventory, she only did custom orders with advance notice, which meant everything was made fresh to order, never reheated. Because she couldn't afford a storefront, she only did delivery, which turned out to be exactly what busy professionals wanted. Because she couldn't hire staff initially, she learned every role deeply, which meant she could train people better when she finally could hire. Within 3 years, her constraints had become her brand. Ultra-fresh, custom, delivery-focused premium catering. The established competitors with their expensive infrastructure couldn't pivot to match her model without abandoning their sunk costs. Her weakness had become their weakness. Her limitation had become her advantage. Everyone told me I needed capital to compete, Maya reflected. But capital would have let me copy what already existed. Constraints forced me to innovate. The obstacles didn't stop me. They showed me where the opportunity was. The principle. Resistance reveals the path. In The Obstacle is the Way philosophy that runs through Greene's work, particularly in the 33 Strategies of War. Strategy, Dr. 16. Hit them where it hurts, the center of gravity strategy. Obstacles aren't random. They reveal where conventional approaches fail and force creative solutions that often prove superior to the original plan. The strategic person doesn't waste energy wishing obstacles away. They accept reality and ask, how does this constraint create opportunity? What does this limitation force me to do differently that might actually be better? Obstacles force innovation. When the conventional path is blocked, you must find unconventional solutions. Often, these turn out to be better than the obvious approach would have been. Maya's capital constraints forced a business model that proved superior to traditional catering. Edison's deafness forced concentration that enhanced his work. Constraints breed resourcefulness. Abundance makes you lazy. You solve problems by throwing resources at them. Scarcity makes you creative. You must find elegant solutions with limited tools, as Greene discusses in the 48 Laws of Power, Law, Number 39. Stir up waters to catch fish, creating advantage through strategic use of limitation. The muscle you build working with constraints serves you long after the constraints disappear. What stops everyone else creates opportunity for you. If an obstacle prevents most people from entering a space or solving a problem, it's creating scarcity. The person who figures out how to overcome it has less competition. The barrier to entry becomes your moat. Adversity reveals character and builds capability. Easy paths don't develop you. Obstacles force you to become more capable, more creative, more resilient. The person who's never faced constraints hasn't developed the resourcefulness that defines mastery, central to Greene's mastery, particularly the apprenticeship phase where struggle builds skill. Reframing transforms experience. The same obstacle can destroy one person and forge another. The difference is interpretation. Edison saw deafness as advantage. Maya saw capital constraints as opportunity. Others in identical situations saw insurmountable barriers. The facts were the same. The meaning they assigned determined the outcome. This doesn't mean obstacles aren't real or that positive thinking solves everything. It means that within constraints, there's almost always agency, choices about how to respond, where to focus, what to try next. The process: accept reality completely. Don't waste energy denying or resenting the obstacle. It exists. Fighting reality depletes you. Acceptance frees energy for solutions. Ask, what does this force me to do differently? The constraint eliminates options. Good. Fewer options means clearer focus. What paths remain open? Often, the forced path is better than the one you originally chose. Look for hidden advantages. Every obstacle has second-order effects. Some are negative, but some create opportunities others miss. Maya's lack of capital meant no sunk costs, complete flexibility, forced innovation. What advantages does your obstacle create? Build the capability the obstacle demands. If you lack resources, become more resourceful. If you lack time, become more efficient. If you lack connections, become better at creating value that attracts connections. The obstacle shows you what to develop. Use the obstacle as filter and teacher. Obstacles eliminate competitors who can't or won't adapt. They teach lessons you wouldn't learn on easier paths. Both effects compound over time into significant advantages. The invitation to transform. What obstacle are you treating as an ending that could be a beginning? Most people have at least one constraint they've accepted as disqualifying. Not enough capital, not enough time, not enough credentials, not the right background, too old, too young, wrong location. What's your biggest current constraint? Name it specifically. Then ask, what is this forcing me to do differently? Not what you wish you could do if it didn't exist, but what pathways it leaves open. Who has succeeded with similar or worse constraints? Research people who achieved what you want, despite comparable obstacles. Study how they turned limitation into advantage. If no one has, maybe that's your opportunity. You'll be first. What capability would overcoming this obstacle require you to develop? That capability itself might be more valuable than the original goal. The resourcefulness Maya built working with constraints became her competitive advantage even after she had capital. What if this obstacle is protecting you from a worse path? Sometimes constraints save you from mistakes you would have made with more resources. Maya's lack of capital prevented her from copying a model that wouldn't have differentiated her. What might your obstacle be protecting you from? Where have you already turned obstacles into advantages? Look at your own history. Times you succeeded despite or because of constraints. What did you do then that you're not doing now? The capability exists. You've just forgotten you have it. Accept the obstacle. Stop fighting reality. Then ask how it serves you. What it forces you to do differently. What it reveals about opportunity. What capability it demands you develop. The obstacle isn't in your way. It is the way. Showing you where innovation is needed, where others have failed, where your unique solution creates value. Edison couldn't hear. Maya had no money. Both became successful not despite their constraints, but partly because of them. The limitation forced a path that proved superior to the obvious one. Your obstacle is information about where the opportunity is. Stop treating it as the end of the road. Start using it as fuel for a different, possibly better path forward. Chapter 9. Build Unstoppable Momentum. The Historical Mirror. In 1863, John D. Rockefeller was a 23-year-old clerk with $800 in savings. The oil industry was chaos. Thousands of small producers and refiners competing frantically. prices swinging wildly, most companies failing within years. Rockefeller saw something others missed. Small, consistent advantages compound into dominance over time. He didn't try to become an oil titan overnight. He focused on one refinery, making it slightly more efficient than competitors. He negotiated slightly better rates with railroads. He reinvested every profit into incremental improvements. Each small advantage was nearly invisible. A few percentage points here, a slightly better process there. But he understood what Greene calls, in the 48 Laws of Power, Law number 28, enter action with boldness, the power of committed momentum. Each small win funded the next move. Better rates allowed lower prices. Lower prices captured more customers. More customers gave him leverage for even better rates. The cycle reinforced itself. Within 15 years, he controlled 90% of American oil refining. Not through one brilliant move, but through hundreds of small advantages compounded relentlessly over time. Competitors saw each individual move as insignificant. By the time they understood the pattern, Rockefeller's momentum was unstoppable. He wrote, "I believe in the power of steady, continuous effort. The majority of men meet with failure because of their lack of persistence in creating new plans to take the place of those which fail. Small moves, consistently executed, create momentum that becomes overwhelming." Compare this to the countless entrepreneurs who tried to win oil refining through single dramatic moves: massive debt-financed expansion, technological gambles, price wars. They aimed for the spectacular victory. Most failed spectacularly. They mistook dramatic action for momentum. True momentum isn't built through fireworks. It's built through consistent small wins that compound into something unstoppable. The modern echo. At 42, Marcus weighed 320 pounds. He'd tried to transform his health dozens of times: dramatic diets, extreme workout plans, complete lifestyle overhauls. Each time he'd start with massive effort, see some quick results, then collapse under the unsustainable intensity. Within weeks, he'd be back where he started, more discouraged than before. Finally, he tried something different. He committed to one small change and sustained it before adding anything else. He started by walking 10 minutes daily. That's it. No diet changes, no gym membership. Just 10 minutes. After 2 weeks of perfect consistency, he added one change to his eating: protein at breakfast. After another 2 weeks, he increased his walk to 15 minutes. Then he added vegetables at lunch. Each change was small enough to sustain indefinitely. The first month, he lost 4 pounds, far less than his previous dramatic diets. But unlike those diets, he didn't quit. The second month, another 5 pounds. The third month, 6 pounds. Not because each month's changes were dramatic, but because he was building on all previous months' changes. 18 months later, Marcus had lost 140 pounds. More importantly, he'd transformed his entire life through dozens of small, sustainable changes, each one adding to the previous ones. He didn't feel deprived or exhausted. He felt powerful because momentum was on his side. "I kept trying to win in one dramatic push," Marcus reflected. "But transformation doesn't work that way. It's built through small, consistent actions that compound into something massive. The key isn't intensity, it's sustainability that creates momentum." The principle, momentum is built through sustained action. In the 48 Laws of Power, Law number 28, enter action with boldness. And throughout the 33 Strategies of War, Strategy number 11, trade space for time, the non-engagement strategy. Robert Greene emphasizes that power comes from sustained momentum, not from sporadic brilliance. The person who acts consistently, building on each previous success, becomes formidable over time. This connects to everything in this book. Self-awareness, Chapter 1. Without action remains abstract. Discovering your path, Chapter 2. Without walking it, changes nothing. Patience, Chapter 3. Without progress is just waiting. Reading people, Chapter 4. Building reputation, Chapter 5. Becoming invaluable, Chapter 6. Choosing battles, Chapter 7. And transforming obstacles, Chapter 8. All require sustained action that builds momentum. Momentum has specific properties. It starts slowly and invisibly. The first actions produce minimal results. Rockefeller's first efficiency improvements barely registered. Marcus's first 10-minute walks changed almost nothing. This is when most people quit. They don't see dramatic results, so they assume nothing is happening. But momentum is building beneath the surface. It compounds through consistency. Each action makes the next action easier and more effective, a principle Greene discusses in Mastery, the cumulative nature of skill development. The first day of practice is hard. The 100th day builds on 99 previous days. The leverage increases over time. It becomes self-reinforcing. Once established, momentum creates its own advantages. Success breeds confidence, which improves performance, which creates more success. Rockefeller's early wins gave him capital for bigger moves. Marcus's early weight loss gave him energy for better workouts. The cycle accelerates. It's harder to start than to sustain. Getting momentum going requires overcoming inertia, the hardest phase. But once moving, staying in motion is easier than the initial push. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. Sustainable action beats unsustainable heroics. It's fragile at first, resilient later. Early momentum breaks easily. One missed day, one setback, and you stop. But sustained momentum becomes resilient. Temporary setbacks don't stop someone with established momentum. They recover and continue. The strategic person builds momentum deliberately. They start smaller than feels meaningful. Big dramatic changes feel productive but rarely sustain. Small changes feel insignificant, but compound reliably. The goal isn't impressive starts. It's unstoppable continuation. As Greene emphasizes in The Laws of Human Nature, Law 13, advance with a sense of purpose. Purposeful direction matters more than dramatic speed. They focus on consistency over intensity. Doing something small every day beats doing something impressive occasionally. The daily action builds the habit, the identity, and the compound results. The occasional heroic effort impresses but doesn't transform. They build on previous wins. Each success becomes the foundation for the next move. They don't restart from zero repeatedly. They ask, now that I've achieved this, what's the logical next step? The progression builds naturally. They protect the streak. Once momentum exists, guarding it becomes the priority. They don't let temporary obstacles break the pattern. They adapt but don't stop. The continuation itself has value beyond any single action. They recognize the asymmetry. Momentum takes time to build, but little time to destroy. Months of consistent effort can be undermined by weeks of inconsistency. This isn't discouraging. It's information about where vigilance matters. Practical applications. Career advancement. Small, consistent visibility. Regular contributions in meetings. Steady delivery of projects. Gradual relationship building. Compounds into reputation and opportunity, faster than sporadic impressive performances, separated by dormancy. Skill development, daily practice, even brief, builds mastery that occasional intensive efforts never achieve. The person practicing 30 minutes daily outpaces the person practicing 5 hours monthly. Business building, steady customer acquisition, consistent product improvement, regular relationship nurturing. These compound into sustainable growth. The dramatic launch followed by inconsistent execution fails. Personal transformation. Marcus proved this. Small sustainable changes maintained consistently transform lives. Dramatic unsustainable changes create temporary results, followed by regression. Relationship building. Regular small acts of care, consistent communication, steady reliability. These build deep trust. Sporadic grand gestures without consistent presence create hollow relationships. The pattern repeats everywhere. Sustained small actions compound into massive results over time. Sporadic large actions feel productive, but don't build the momentum that transforms. The invitation to begin. What one small action could you sustain daily that would compound into significant transformation over time? Not what would create the fastest results, but what could you maintain indefinitely? What's the smallest version of your goal that you could do every single day? If you want to write a book, could you write for 10 minutes daily? If you want to build a business, could you make one sales contact daily? If you want to transform health, could you do one small healthy action daily? Find the version small enough that consistency is virtually guaranteed. What have you tried to change through dramatic, unsustainable effort? The diet that was too restrictive. The business plan that required impossible hours. The skill development that demanded unrealistic intensity. What if you reduce the ambition by 90% but increase the consistency to 100%? The math might surprise you. What existing momentum are you protecting, and what are you allowing to break? Look at what you're already consistent about, probably more than you realize. What's working? How can you protect and extend that? Where are you breaking momentum through inconsistency? What would 6 months of perfect consistency create? Not 6 months of perfect results, 6 months of perfect action, however small. Most people drastically underestimate what sustained consistency produces and drastically overestimate what sporadic intensity creates. What's the next small step? You have everything from this book: self-awareness, your path, patience, ability to read people, reputation building, indispensability, battle selection, obstacle transformation. But none of it matters without sustained action. What's the single smallest step you can take today and repeat tomorrow? Start today. Pick one small action aligned with your goals. Do it today, then do it tomorrow, then the next day. Don't add anything else until this becomes automatic. That's how momentum builds. Not through grand plans or dramatic transformations, but through small sustainable actions repeated until they compound into something unstoppable. Rockefeller didn't become an oil titan through one brilliant move. Marcus didn't transform his health through one perfect month. Both built momentum through hundreds of small, consistent actions that compounded over time. You're at the end of this book, but the beginning of implementation. You know the laws. You understand the principles. You've seen the patterns in history and modern life. Now comes the only question that matters. Will you act? Will you start small enough to sustain? Will you continue long enough for momentum to build? Will you protect that momentum once it exists? Because knowledge without action is just entertainment. Strategy without execution is just fantasy. Understanding without momentum is just potential. The path is clear. The principles are proven. The choice, as it has been throughout this book, is yours. But choose knowing this: momentum is being built or lost right now. The question isn't whether forces are compounding in your life. The question is whether you're directing those forces intentionally toward what matters. Small moves, consistently executed, become unstoppable over time. Start today. Start small, but start. And don't stop. Conclusion: the strategic life. Robert Greene spent decades studying power, mastery, and human nature across centuries of history. He identified patterns that repeat endlessly. The same strategies that worked in ancient Rome work in modern boardrooms. The same psychological truths that shaped Renaissance courts shape contemporary relationships. The same principles that built empires build careers and lives. This book distilled those patterns into 9 essential lessons organized around one insight. Sustainable success requires 3 things in sequence. First, master yourself. You can't influence the world effectively while blind to your own patterns. Self-awareness, Chapter 1, isn't optional, it's foundational. Discovering your unique path, Chapter 2, focuses that awareness into direction. Cultivating strategic patience, Chapter 3, gives you the timeline that mastery demands. Without this foundation, everything else collapses. You're building on sand. Second, decode human nature. Once you understand yourself, you must understand others. Reading What's Unspoken, Chapter 4, reveals truth beneath performance. Building unshakable reputation, Chapter 5, creates the currency of trust and influence. Making yourself invaluable, Chapter 6, positions you where opportunity flows. These aren't manipulation tactics. They're navigation tools for a world where human dynamics determine outcomes. Third, execute with strategy. Understanding without action remains theoretical. Choosing battles wisely, Chapter 7, focuses finite energy on what matters. Turning obstacles into fuel, Chapter 8, transforms resistance into advantage. Building unstoppable momentum, Chapter 9, compounds small wins into transformation. Execution separates those who know from those who achieve. Remember Sarah from the introduction? She was talented but stuck because she didn't understand how the world actually works beneath official narratives. She worked hard while her colleague Marcus worked strategically. The difference wasn't intelligence or work ethic. It was awareness of the patterns Greene identified. After discovering these principles, Sarah didn't become a different person. She became conscious. She saw her blind spots. She identified her actual path. She became patient with her development. She read people accurately. She built genuine reputation. She made herself invaluable. She chose her battles. She transformed obstacles. She built momentum. 6 months later, her entire trajectory had changed. Not through luck or connections, but through understanding and applying timeless principles of power, mastery, and human nature. You now have the same blueprint she discovered. The same laws that shaped empires and transformed lives throughout history. The same patterns that separate those who struggle from those who thrive. But knowledge alone changes nothing. You've reached the end of this book, but you're standing at the beginning of application. Everything depends on what you do next. Will you examine your shadow honestly, or remain a stranger to yourself? Will you follow your actual path, or keep pursuing what you think you should want? Will you develop patience for mastery, or keep chasing quick wins that don't compound? Will you watch what people do, or just believe what they say? Will you build reputation through character, or chase it through performance? Will you make yourself invaluable, or remain replaceable? Will you choose your battles strategically, or exhaust yourself fighting everything? Will you transform obstacles into fuel, or let them stop you? Will you build momentum through consistent action, or wait for dramatic breakthroughs that never come? These aren't abstract questions. They're choices you make daily through thousands of small actions that either build toward strategic mastery or drift toward mediocrity. Greene gave us the map. This book organized it into a walkable path. But walking it is your work alone. The principles are proven. The patterns are real. The path is clear. Now comes the only question that ever mattered. Will you walk it? Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one." Greene added, "Waste no more time pretending the world works the way you wish it did. Learn how it actually works." Now add your line to this legacy. Waste no more time learning without doing. The strategic life begins with your next action. Choose wisely, act boldly, build momentum. The blueprint is complete. The rest is up to you.